Hi, people. I've just been looking over a case which to me reiterates how utterly tone deaf a big part of our legal establishment is. This case really is outrageous, and I know I'm not the only one that thinks this. It's been reported in numerous sources, but I'm going to read out the LBC report. Um, Now, frustratingly, in none of the reports does it mention the judge involved in presiding over the case. I'm not sure why that is. I feel that judges, much like the courts of law themselves, are very difficult to get hold of. I mean, it's a strange thing. They're in a position of power, but they have no email address, no phone number, nothing. They're not like MPs who have like a surgery address or contact details. Not that MPs always respond, they don't, but um, what we have here is unelected people who are in a position of power, but they're basically unaccountable to the public. I've long felt that, and I think this reiterates it. So before I get into this, I've just emailed the court in question, which is Luton Crown Court, and frustratingly, after having sent the email, they then say if your inquiry is in reference to, and then it gave me a link which is more appropriate. It's about a closed case. But why don't they put that on public information rather than saying it after the fact? I think courts across England and Wales they need to know what if they're more transparent in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but they need to be transparent. Recently there was a change in the justice system whereby verdicts were read out, but these are trickle down changes. A lot more needs to happen, and I think one thing is the whole system needs to be more accountable. So, you know, there has to be a situation where if people are not satisfied, if people are disillusioned and angry with decisions being made, that the presiding judge faces some scrutiny over his or her decisions. We seem to have a situation where weak judges can just make these rulings and the public is pretty much powerless to do anything about it. I think that is wrong. I'm not saying that decisions should be made by the public. I'm saying they're in a position of power and their decisions impact people's lives. So there should be some recourse on that, and there isn't. Anyway, I'm going to read out the case here. The report isn't extensively long, so bear with me, but I think you'll share my outrage at this. I just think the whole way it's been handled is a disgrace, and I'll add a bit more afterwards, but here we go. This is the report. Worst day of my life. Father's fury at being jailed for running burglars off the road as crooks walk free. This is from LBC, and the report's by Will Taylor. A dad of two who was, I should say it's the 2nd of December, so that's today. A dad of two who was jailed for chasing two burglars and running them off the road has said his sentencing was the worst day of my life, while the crooks got suspended sentences. Adam White blasted the punishments given to Taylor Benford and Ryan Paul, both 25, who were armed with a crowbar and bolt cutters when they tried to break into his family home in September 2019, as a slap in the face. His wife Lindsay, 34, and their two children, aged 8 and 10, were also in the house, so this was a family man with young children. They managed to make a speedy getaway on a motorbike, but White chased them in a Mercedes 4x4, eventually running them off the road close to his home in Leighton Buzzard. They were left with serious injuries, including a fractured skull, bleeding on the brain, and broken bones. Or maybe they should have thought about that before, targeting an innocent member of the public. They're now trying to sue Mr. White's insurance for £1 million. I hope they fail miserably. White, 34, was sentenced to 22 months in prison in February for causing serious injury by dangerous driving. Meanwhile, the burglars, Benford and Paul, walked free from court with a suspended sentence. They're fit enough to get in a car again and do that, but not face prison time for their actions. It does make you feel like it is a slap in the face, Mr. White said. Why doesn't everyone just be a criminal? It's sickening knowing there is no deterrent, and I think many people will be sharing its sentiments. Benford and Paul did not comment when police interviewed them after the incident, while Mr. White explained his version of events. I just told the truth and that's that, he told the Mail. expressing his regret at pursuing the pair. My actions were my actions. I shouldn't have left my house, and I've had to pay the price for that. And he spoke about how his wife Lindsay terminated her pregnancy because they worried that she could not raise a baby on her own if Mr. White went to prison. That was the worst thing we had to do. Within a week and a half of the incident, we made a decision to have a termination, he said. So this is already implications that go well beyond the burglary. We didn't know what was happening or a charge or anything like that. What do you do? We made the most sensible decision we could at the time. It was incredibly hard. The pain she went through, I sat there with her the whole time. The 2.5 years leading up to the court date, we were in limbo and we didn't know what to do. This is probably because of the backlog due to the pandemic. He said being jailed at Luton Crown Court was the worst day of my life, and he was crying as he was led out of the door. First 4 or 5 days in prison, I was so scared, he said. Now out of jail, where he got a plastering qualification, he still has to wear an ankle tag. Cannot leave his home between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. He was also banned from driving until 2025, which has affected his work as an electrician. So he can't go to the pub in the evening, he can't go to the cinema, he can't do things that, we take for granted. The case aired on an episode of the Channel 4 documentary series 24 Hours in Police Custody on Monday night, sparking an outpouring of sympathy from some viewers who were furious that he was convicted. One viewer even set up a GoFundMe for Adam after he spent £50,000 of his family savings, credit cards, and loans to pay for legal fees. In just one day, the fundraiser raked up more than £91,000. Huge credit to that fundraiser, including a generous donation from one anonymous person of £15,000. God bless that person. That's incredibly generous. So there is good coming out of this story. On Friday afternoon, the fundraiser stood at £151,000. Incredible. In an update on Twitter, Mr. White said the money and that any money donated from the evening of December the 1st will be given to charity. He said, we are overwhelmed with the support that everyone has given us and cannot thank you all enough. We truly can't believe how generous and thoughtful all of our donors are. Every word of support has encouraged us to remain strong and put warmth in our hearts that we thought we lost 3 years ago. We feel so incredibly thankful for the money everyone has raised to help us get back to our losses, and thanks to all of you we have. At this stage, I would like to take this opportunity to say to anyone who wishes to donate to the page, we will be passing on any future funds from now to charity to honour the loss of our baby. We will update further information on the page shortly. Again, thank you all so much. It's time for us to move forward and start afresh the life you've given us all back. But can he move forward? This is a man who, he has to wear an ankle tag, like he's a dangerous criminal. He can't leave his house after 7 p.m. So, like I say, he can't go to the pub, he can't go to the cinema. Um, those might sound like mundane things, but it changes someone's life. I think the whole case is a disgrace. Now, let me just cut to the point of why he was sentenced. Technically, he was involved in dangerous driving. That's technical, right? He did choose to pursue them. He did choose to go out of the house and pursue them that way, and apparently ram them into the road. But I think a lot of people would say, this is an example of someone just snapping, basically. And he said it was a spur of the moment decision. I imagine it was a combination of fear and anger and the adrenaline set in. Now, probably it was a reckless thing to do, honestly, but I am in no way going to judge him, and I don't think anyone will. Um, Bedfordshire police said they understand, but he shouldn't have taken the law into his own hands. What the police and the legal system need to understand is that time and time again we see cases like this where criminals get a tap on the wrist. Apparently, the reason the burglars didn't go to prison is because their injuries would make it difficult. Now, it might be that the penal system would have to pay to accommodate them. I say give them the minimal provisions required, minimal. But this is it's just perverse, where you have two hardened career criminals who have no remorse, who could very plausibly do it again. Um, Yet you have a decent man who admits that his actions were reckless, yet he's being treated like a criminal. And his wife and his family have suffered. You know, two young children would have had their father in prison. His wife had to terminate her pregnancy. They're suffering. I really hope this family can build up again, and I hope it gives them a bit of comfort to know that the vast majority of the public is on their side. But this also reflects appallingly on the justice system. The judge isn't named, but shame on him or her. I think they should resign in disgrace. It won't happen, of course. I've just emailed Luton Crown Courts, um, basically expressing the issues I've raised in this video, because as it stands, there is no accountability. You know, you can, if you think a case is unduly lenient, you can email the Attorney General, who could then maybe refer it to the Court of Appeal, but the chances of anything actually changing are minimal, minimal. So I think that for something like this, you know, judges look at aggravating and mitigating factors. Technically, yes, he was driving recklessly. If an innocent member of the public had died, this would be, you know, I would say, well, yeah, he has to pay for that. But the only victims in this, in the sense of the driving part of it, and I'm reluctant to even call them victims, were the two criminals who brought on the entire situation themselves. Had they not went out that night to burgle an innocent man and his family, they wouldn't have got injured. So they can feel sorry for themselves, but you know, maybe they should reflect on their lives. And maybe it should be a wake up call. The fact that they're now planning to sue him shows that they're remorseless, hardened criminals. He even said that he didn't actually want to hurt them, and he he accepted that it was, you know, he's showing remorse for the incident. Um, I just think there's something fundamentally wrong about this. And the judge, I mean, it's just another example of a judge who is in a bubble, who's tone deaf to public opinion. That judge will know damn well that the public will be furious about this, but he doesn't care. I think it was a man. Some sources named it a particular judge, but I don't want to link the two together because it was them referring to other cases, and I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to name the wrong person. But I do think, as a profession, I don't think highly of British judges. I think many of them are massively out of touch. I think many of them are tone deaf, and I think they're sort of elite, not in the sense of, I'm not talking about financial background. I think they're sort of in this kind of legal bubble. I don't think they understand public optics. I really don't. I don't think the sentencing council does either. Because if they did, they would make decisions that are much more reflective of public opinion. What should have happened in this case, if I were the judge, I would have said, Mr. White, I totally understand why you did what you did, but you did drive recklessly, so I don't know, maybe give him a warning or something. But to send this man to prison like he's a dangerous criminal, that is obscene. That's obscene. I mean, there was a case recently where a guy was high on drugs and he killed someone going down the wrong way of a road. You know, I'm hard line when it comes to reckless driving. But I do think that circumstances matter, and I do think when you have someone responding to a serious crime, um, that should absolutely be a mitigating factor. The judge has ignored this mitigating factor. You know, it's not like this guy just decided that he was going to go out one night and drive recklessly. Um, Probably I would have given him a warning and maybe a driving ban, but that's it. I certainly would have expressed sympathy, and I would definitely have jailed the two criminals. The fact that they walked free and he served, he was actually released in September, but he still served 5 months in prison. Now, apparently, one of his cellmate in another report, not the LBC report, but another report, cited that one of his cellmates befriended him. I imagine actually many inside would be very sympathetic to this man because inmates have a strange sort of code of conduct. You know, if he was like a sex offender or a rival criminal, he would probably be targeted. But the fact that he's an innocent man, you know, inmates read newspapers. They probably agree it was a disgrace. They probably are thinking, why are you in jail with us? You know, they could probably see it. And I think the arrogance of these two criminals, these two burglars, to think that they can actually sue him, I hope that falls flat. And I hope they lose money trying to do so. I mean, the suspended sentences, apparently, even if they had some brain damage, if it depending on the gravity of that, if it wasn't that, if it wasn't that serious, they could ostensibly, organize themselves enough to go and burgle someone else, maybe to make money. I don't know. They might be angry that, oh, that job was a loss, so we'll try again. I mean, hardened burglars don't just give up after one attempt. And very often it's the same people who are targeted over and over again. So the whole thing it's infuriating and it's a travesty and it's a glaring example of what is rotten in our justice system. And I suspect many people around the world would look at this and say, what the hell's wrong with the British justice system? Why is it that an innocent man is punished, yet the criminals walk free? It's a disgrace. I don't know if I'll get a response from the Crown Court or not. It'll probably be some very vague message about we cannot comment on an individual case. It's always the same thing, you know. There is an evasiveness. There's absolutely an evasiveness about how the legal establishment responds. And by the way, when I talk about the legal establishment, I'm talking about the Ministry of Justice, I'm talking about individual judges, I'm talking about the court system, and I'm talking about the Sentencing Council of England and Wales. I imagine it isn't much better in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but they are separate jurisdictions. Um, and something has to change. Like I said, what should have happened in this case? The burglar should have been jailed. He should have not been jailed because of mitigating factors, but maybe given a warning and maybe a driving ban. But that should have been it. The fact that his poor wife had to terminate her pregnancy, that's tragic, and that must have been an awful ordeal and decision that they had to go through. That is a direct response to this disgraceful judicial decision. And the other thing is he now has a criminal record. But for what? I think I actually believe that employers should know the context of an offence. This thing about someone having to disclose their criminal record for years, cases like this show why that could be problematic because this man's not a criminal. He's actually a victim of crime. Yet, I mean, it sounds like he's self employed, but if he was to apply for a job, he'd be technically a criminal, and that has to change. So there has to be context involved, and it's an awful thing for anyone to go through. And I just hope that that family can really rebuild their lives and move on. But as a general thing, it's a disgrace on the court involved. It's a disgrace on the judge involved. The criminals I'm not even going to mention because, they're remorseless. They are what they are. But the judge is in a position of power, and he or she made this disgraceful decision, this tone deaf decision, this immoral decision, this unjust decision.